Guys, y'all know what that means. It's time for another episode of Britt's Fantasy Blitz. I am your host, Britt Flinn, and we're coming off a pretty good week 12. There weren't any bye weeks. We didn't have to deal with too many injuries that happened this weekend, thank goodness. But going into week 13, there are a ton of teams on bye, and we are getting close to that fantasy football playoff push. So we want to make sure, especially at this point in the season, to get everything right. So, first off, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show. Make sure that you get your questions in the chat and we'll make sure to answer them as we go throughout the show. While you're there, like and subscribe. That way, you don't miss any of our awesome content coming up. Again, getting close to the playoffs, you don't want to miss everything we've got going on. The DFS show, the Quick Out, the Alarm Fantasy Football show, our start sit shows that we have going on Sundays. So much content coming out here that is going to be very beneficial as you go into those fantasy football playoffs. Thank you so much to my producer, Brian Burns. I know that we've got a loaded show here for you today. But before we get into it, let's just kind of recap this week because, as I said, we had a pretty good week. We had some really great plays that were in the matchup previews this week. Kieran Williams, Zay Flowers, Nico Collins, over Tank Dell, which was a crazy call at the time, but it actually ended up working out. Isaiah Pacheco, Jacoby Myers over Devontae Adams. I did have Michael Pittman over Jonathan Taylor, but it was a point 0.4 difference, so we'll just let that one slide. Of course, we did have some misses as Saquon Barkley let us down, Adam Thielen let us down, but for the most part, we were pretty spot on. So feeling good coming out of week 12, but there is one final matchup tonight between the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. So let's go ahead and move on into our Sunday night football recap. Before we jump in, we will talk about tonight's preview, get some DFS options thrown in there. We'll talk about some Monday night bold predictions. And as always, we will end with some sleeper picks for this Monday night game. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. Last night's game between the Ravens and Chargers, Ravens won 20-10. Not a lot of offense on either side of the ball, but Zay Flowers did have himself a day. He scored one rushing touchdown and one receiving touchdown, even though he only finished with 62 yards. Got to feel pretty good about the 23.2 PPR points that he put up, which was good for wide receiver 6 on the week. I also want to throw in how great his touchdown celebration was with him throwing the bouquet. And then the fact that he had to explain it after the game to Lamar Jackson because Lamar Jackson just didn't get what the celebration was about. Pretty funny there. Speaking of Lamar, he didn't look great, but only 177 passing yards, one touchdown. The ball was spread around a ton, so there wasn't really one single receiver who stood out in the receiving game. Really kind of disappointing against the worst passing defense in the league. But a positive on that is that Isaiah Likely did look like he could fill in that Mark Andrews role, which was something that we were a little bit worried about after seeing week 1 with him only getting one target. Last week, him only getting a couple targets. I said it on the Start Sit show on Sunday morning that you really can't trust Likely until we see that target share, but we did see it a little bit yesterday with those 6 targets and 18.75% target share with 4 receptions, 40 yards. I think going forward, as he gets more worked into this offense, he's going to be a guy that you're going to want on your rosters, especially in this kind of wasteland tight end landscape. No offense, Coop. I see you in the chat. The running game, honestly, was pretty non-existent for Gus Edwards, which was disappointing, to say the least. 8 for 26. Keaton Mitchell, though, came through. He outcarried both Edwards and Justice Hill, carried the ball 9 times for 64 yards, and he also had 2 receptions for an additional 25. So that was a really good showing for him. I know that he was a waiver wire darling a few weeks ago because of his explosiveness. Then he let people down and they weren't so sure on him. But as he keeps creeping up in this snap share count, he may be a guy that you want to roster going forward, especially into the fantasy football playoffs, if that snap share continues. And Grumpy Sports Fan in the chat says, why isn't Keaton Mitchell getting more action? You know, he's working in there slowly but surely. I think as long as that explosiveness can kind of show itself on a regular week to week basis, that it's going to be something that we're going to see going forward, especially with the bye week. They're going to get something done, they're going to have something figured out. The explosiveness this guy has cannot be understated. So let's flip to the Chargers because there was not a lot of offense here. I benched Justin Herbert in several leagues. There was one league where I did not take him out and instead played him over CJ Stroud, and that was a gigantic mistake on my part. The Chargers were already strapped for playmakers, and then when Quentin Johnston went down, it just got worse throughout the game. It was a hodgepodge of receivers, including Alex Erickson, Jalen Guyton, Darius Davis. Stone Smart had a target, even though he didn't catch it. It was just kind of a mess. And while Keenan Allen was his usual target hog self, he up until the very last minute, he was 13 of 13. But unfortunately, he missed two of his final three targets. There was also a bizarre fumble that was called that wasn't a fumble in the Buffalo Eagles game. It was the exact same play. So I'm not sure why it was called in that game where it wasn't called here. Um, but we need more consistency in officiating. But I'm digressing. So let's move on. Austin Eckler, unfortunately, was a non factor yet again. 32 yards rushing and 32 yards receiving. He also had a critical fumble, and it just doesn't seem like he can get anything going this season. They put up a stat on the screen yesterday that he has the lowest yards per carry average of his entire career at only 3.9. I don't know if this is Kellen Moore. I don't know if it's an injury, his age, whatever, but this is not the Austin Eckler that we have been used to seeing on a year to year basis. And it's kind of getting concerning. Again, Justin Herbert only went 29 of 44 for only 217 yards and a touchdown, but he also had a critical interception and some critical miscues when they were trying to make that comeback in the final seconds of the game. So, not a super exciting game. I don't know if we all expected the Chargers to win over Baltimore because Baltimore has been red hot, but it's something that you just don't really want to see, especially after all that money that they paid for Herbert. Hopefully, once they get Josh Palmer back, it'll open things up a little bit, but it's just not, their offense is not cohesive whatsoever. Before we jump into the top news and recap from this week, I want to answer this question from Gabe the Babe. Thoughts on Justin Fields tonight? Your last left to play and you're down by 11, half PPR. I think you're totally fine. We'll get into this a little bit later, but although the Vikings have been pretty tough against opposing quarterbacks, Justin Fields offers a whole other dimension to his game, which is that rushing upside that he has. So I think you're fine. I think that you're going to come out ahead on this. Um, it may be a little closer than you would like to see, but I think he gets it done. Ani Coop in the chat, love to see Ani Coop. How about your Rams? Yeah. And this is something that I was also wrong on. I thought that the Cardinals would keep it close. I thought that this game would be a little bit back and forth, but the Rams went out there, and although Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua were basically non existent, they still found a way to get it done with Tyler Higbee, with Kieran Williams coming back off IR. That looked good. Oh my gosh. If you held on to him, if you had an IR spot, that guy really returned his value, especially being a waiver wire pickup. Um, and then Grumpy Sports Fan also says played Dobbs over Herbert, hoping for a big game tonight. Yeah, we'll get into that. I think he can have a big game. So let's get into some top news today because there is a ton. And the top story is that the Panthers fired head coach Frank Reich this morning. It's been kind of back and forth in Carolina. They haven't been able to get anything going really. At one point, they switched over play calling duties, gave it to Thomas Brown, switched it back to Frank Reich. And last week, when we saw Adam Thielen get the targets again, we're like feeling pretty good about everything. We're thinking that everything is going right, but unfortunately, did not work out yesterday. And the problem with this, well, there are several problems. They traded that number one pick or that first round pick So there is no incentive for them to tank. And although they're not actively tanking, I think that it's going to end up being a very good deal for the Bears, who traded for DJ Moore. Not only did they trade a first round pick, but they traded DJ Moore. Um, it seems also that Frank Reich wanted to draft CJ Stroud. There was a tweet from our friends over at Sleeper this morning who said that he wanted the team to draft CJ Stroud, and that's been a very big point of contention throughout the season. Instead, they selected Bryce Young. Now that they've fired Reich, um, and they don't have their first round pick, the Panthers team stats are just it's horrendous. I don't know if it's because of injuries, because of that offensive line, because you brought in a 33-year-old wide receiver to be your number one guy, but they are 1 and 10, which is dead last in the NFL. They rank 31st in offensive yards. They rank 29th in points scored and then 30th in points allowed. I mean, nothing is going right on any side of the ball here. Now, is firing Reich the correct decision? Because I don't necessarily know that it is. If Reich wanted to do one thing and management and the head office did another, and that's the cause of what's going on, then maybe they need to take a look in the mirror instead of making Frank Reich a scapegoat. Unfortunately, it is a business. It is what it is. The guys in charge don't really, necessarily always take the blame. And I say this as a Dallas Cowboys fan who has dealt with Jerry Jones in that front office for years and years and years. But it's just not a good look for the Panthers, especially giving away that first round pick. I don't feel like they're really going to get better. And it just sets Bryce Young up for a bad situation for pretty much years to come. If you start in a hole, it's very hard to dig yourself out of. Some other news today: the Las Vegas Raiders released cornerback Marcus Peters today. He did have an interception in week 8, but he was benched in yesterday's loss to the Chiefs, and then they decided to release him today. This move does save them around $1.5 million in incentives, but when the defense is already bad, why do you want to make it worse? Yes, Marcus Peters is on the older side, but he is that veteran presence that they have in that locker room on the defense. And he's not been the guy who's been bad. I don't really understand why they benched him. Maybe with the coaching change there, they're just looking to grab picks to completely rebuild, but it's very, very puzzling. Just eat that 1.5 million, potentially, you know, win some games at home. I think that this is indicative that they are in full on tank mode in the AFC West, besides the Chargers. Um, the New England Patriots also lost another one at home. It was heartbreaking. It was a last second field goal. I actually went into the kitchen to grab a drink. And when I came back, I was like, there's no way that they just lost. This was a chip shot. They should have made this. Um, it's just the whole Patriots organization is also one that's in shambles. Mac Jones was benched at halftime with Bailey Zappi, but he wasn't much better, although he did throw that touchdown to Ramondre Stevenson. I just don't know what the problem is in New England. And what's more concerning is the fact that Belichick comes out today and says, we haven't named a starter for week 13. We don't know who our starter is going to be. I think that that ultimately harms your team. I get the gamesmanship and the coach speak that he's doing by not allowing opposing defenses to game plan for the specific quarterback, but it also doesn't allow your receivers to really get a relationship and get on track when you're splitting first team reps with one quarterback or another. They are very different in their styles of play. You need that time to develop. And just rotating quarterbacks in and out is not it. Not only that, it really knocks down the confidence of Mac Jones. And when you have confidence issues, you're not going to play your best. That's just how it is. It's a mental thing. It's why soccer has a term called the yips, because the mental aspect of playing any kind of sport is very, very real. Speaking of mental aspect and quitting, Deontay Johnston basically quit on his team yesterday. And it was especially apparent in the footage of him walking away from a live ball after Jalen Warren fumbled. Obviously, he wasn't going to block. He knew it was a run play. He knew that there was no reason for him to block on the outside, but he looked down at that ball and then just turned and walked away as the defensive player was going back upfield. It's not a good look. There are definitely more problems in this organization than just Matt Canada, because we saw George Pickens remove every mention of the Steelers from his social media. He unfollowed everybody in the organization. Apparently, Deontay Johnson and Mika Fitzpatrick got into it after last week. There is just a lot going on here, and it's much, much more than coaching. There are egos, there are very unhappy people, and Mike Tomlin has uh, pretty much been a coach who's been able to manage egos. So interesting in what's going on there. And as Coop said in Coop's Fantasy Fiasco last hour, the the Steelers are a playoff team. How they are a playoff team, I have zero idea. They're going to go in and get blown out. The spread in their very first game that they play, if they make it to the playoffs, is just going to be huge because they are not a playoff team. In some other news, finally, All Pro linebacker Shaquille Leonard is scheduled to visit my Dallas Cowboys tomorrow, and I am positively giddy about this. Dallas is pretty thin at linebacker, especially after losing Leighton Vander Esch. And what's even better about this fit is that the Colts are footing the bill and would be paying the majority on his salary this year. So I love it. Jerry Jones, I take back what I said. Go get this done. In some final news, Travis Kelce becomes the fastest tight end in history to reach 11,000 receiving yards. Lamar Jackson also hit a rushing milestone yesterday, which is great to see. And then Raiders safety Roderick Teamer was arrested for a DUI on Saturday night and was inactive in Sunday's loss to the Chiefs, which makes it even more puzzling that the Raiders released Marcus Peters. Like, can I just say this? Can we stop drinking and driving? Especially as football players. There is no reason to do that. You've got your whole team, you've got sports facility people on call. You have money to call an Uber yourself. There is no reason to drink and drive. Please don't do it. We saw how the Henry Rugg situation turned out. Just an, another reason why I think that the Raiders also have some internal issues. So, getting to some injury news, Browns quarterback Dorian Thompson Robinson was ruled out with a concussion in the loss to the Broncos. I think we could maybe see Joe Flacco next week. Now, how that works out, I don't really know. Flacco is getting long in the tooth, as we say here in the South. Hasn't played really since last season. Don't really know what to expect out of him, but it has to be better than what we've seen from DTR and PJ Walker. Amari Cooper also left the game and had x rays on his ribs. Although they did come back negative, we're still waiting to hear the severity of that injury. Patriots wide receiver Demario Douglas left the game with a head injury, although it is unclear whether he's actually in concussion protocol or whether it was more of like a laceration situation. Um, the Saints also had a couple of big names go down. Chris Olave left due to a concussion. Before that, wide receiver Rashid Shaheed went to the locker room with a thigh injury and didn't return. Um, Pay close attention to the waiver wire article because you could tell a definite shift in the Saints game plan once those two went out. It was very much focused on the run game, on dumping the ball down to Alvin Kamara. After that, Jamal Williams got hurt. I mean, it was just kind of a mess. And Derek Carr cannot get anything done in the red zone. I saw a meme with Field of Dreams where the younger player steps over the line, and it was a metaphor for Derek Carr as soon as he stepped over that 20 and got into the red zone, because his red zone percentage is one of the worst in the entire league. If he's missing these two receivers, they could have a massive fall depending on how long these guys are out. We do have a comment in the chat. I am not sure if this has been verified. So, Burns, if it has, let me know. But apparently, Josh McCown also just got fired by the new interim coach in Carolina. So he may start for the Browns. We never know. Josh McCown has been a veteran quarterback presence. I don't think that he'll start for the Browns, but he could definitely show up on somebody's roster as another coach or a backup. Um, Chad also says Ann Staley. I have not gotten that notification yet, although he is on the hot seat. Um, so I haven't gotten that. Speaking of Roderick Teamer, though, I did get a notification saying that Roderick Teamer has also been waived by the Raiders. So their secondary is in a whole lot of trouble. So with that, let's jump on to some Week 12 fantasy leaders, which were crazy. If you had some high scoring people, I mean, man, they were high scoring. Josh Allen, 40.7 points. Jalen Hurts, 35.5. And I will say, Jalen Hurts had me worried in the first half. It's like that. They had me in the first half. I'm not going to lie. Until he started scoring those rushing touchdowns, I was very, very concerned about his production. Coming in third is Dak Prescott, who threw 4 touchdowns against the Commanders on Thanksgiving. Not a big surprise there, as the Commanders and their secondary has just been completely awful. And they did also waive their D backs coach and I believe their defensive coordinator after that loss on Friday. For running backs, it was Kieran Williams. Coming back from IR, we're always a little hesitant for somebody to just come back in our lineup and produce, but this guy did it. Christian McCaffrey, no surprise there, 30.9 points, 2 touchdowns. What is surprising is number 3 with Bijan Robinson at 27.3. It was like Arthur Smith finally listened to everything that fantasy managers, us much maligned fantasy managers, had been saying all season long. Hey, if you want your hot hand, why don't you use your best player on your team? Quit using Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson. Look how it worked. 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving. He was most likely the reason that the Falcons won that game, although I will give some special credit to Jesse Bates, who scored that interception and that pick six. And wide receiver, again, no surprise, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, but coming in third was Rashee Rice on the Kansas City Chiefs. We all expected him to have a great game against the Eagles last week. It didn't happen. This week it happened. He got the target share. He was every bit the guy that we thought that he was. And I hope, P.S. Andy Reid, that you keep using this guy, especially in the absence of McCole Hardman and Kadarius Toney. For defense, Dolphins against the Jets, no real surprise. Broncos after they knocked out DTR, no real surprise. And then the Dallas Cowboys against the Commanders. So for some duds, these were a little bit unfortunate. And the first one with Brock Purdy coming in at QB 23 with only 11.5 points. I don't really blame Brock Purdy. He looked good. It was more of an issue of rushing touchdowns being scored rather than him being inaccurate. So I don't think that you can be out on Brock Purdy. Give him another chance, especially going up against, I believe it's the Eagles next week. And then my second one is Tua, QB 25 at only 9.8 points. Again, I think that this was more of a game script situation. I don't think that he's a bad quarterback going forward. To answer Michael in the chat, am I worried about Tua for the playoff run? I don't think so. I think he still has a lot of upside. This was just the Jets. This was a game that they had well in hand. They didn't have to worry about throwing. Once they threw to Tyreek and he got his points, it was just let's run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. So I'm not really worried about him. It was just a disappointing week, especially if you had to start him in a super flex situation. For running back, we had Joe Mixon coming in at RB 34 with 8 PPR points. I really thought that Jake Browning was going to lead to a much heavier run game script, but unfortunately it didn't happen. Same with Saquon Barkley. I thought that, he's the only reliable guy on this team. RB 43 with 6.2 fantasy points. I think that he'll bounce back, but It's so inconsistent, and you never know what you can get on a week to week basis with him. And they face some pretty tough teams coming up over the next few weeks. So if you're relying on him for your playoff run, I would look on waivers tonight and see if there is an emerging guy who's coming up rather than just relying on Saquon. Finally, it's Gus Edwards, RB 45, 4.7 points. I did start Gus Edwards in a league. Very disappointed in him. The Chargers, we knew were going to be very susceptible to passing plays, but Lamar only threw for 177 yards. Why was Gus Edwards getting out carried by Keaton Mitchell? There's something about this rookie that Harbaugh likes and that this offense likes. And they, I think, will continue to use him. Going to be very interesting coming off the bye to see where they stand. For wide receivers, wide receiver 43 with 9.1 points is Cortland Sutton. He almost had that touchdown in the end zone. Almost. Just a little toe tap situation that didn't go his way. I'm still in on Cortland Sutton. I'm in on Russell Wilson. I think that this team can do what they need to do. It was just unfortunate. Next up, Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 44 with 9 points. Going against Dallas, what can you do? The next one, though, Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 44 with 9 points. It seemed like a lack of effort to me. And that's what concerns me. If you fire your offensive coordinator, you expect them to bounce back and to have a good game. You expect a little more fire under their asses, basically. And he just looked like he didn't care all over the place. So there is definitely a problem going on there. I don't know if we can rely on him for the rest of the season, to be honest. Coming in next, Chris Godwin, wide receiver 53, 7.5. There were several drops that he had, and he did not look great. He has not looked great all season. He's another one that I would be very wary of going into playoffs. Cooper Kupp, wide receiver 75 with 4.8 PPR points. Yes, he did re-aggravate that ankle, which we were concerned about happening. But I think it was more of the fact that this game was just out of hand, that Stafford didn't really need to throw to them after they went up big so early. So don't worry about Cooper Kupp. He's going to get better. They just need to give him some rest. Finally, Adam Thielen. Oh, Adam Thielen. Wide receiver 113 with 1.2 fantasy points. Hopefully, this change of coaching and this shakeup is going to get something right with him. We've seen him get the targets early on in the season, but they've dipped sharply over the past few weeks. Again, makes me very nervous. And until I see something on this offense that shows me that he's going to be the focal point, I can't trust him. Finishing up with tight ends, George Kittle, tight end 23, 4.9. I think this was just another game script situation. It was already out of hand. McCaffrey had two, Debo had two. Not really too concerned about him, but I will say, with all the weapons healthy, his target share has gone down. So he may not be that top tier tight end that we're all expecting. Jake Ferguson coming in at tight end 26 with 4.5 points. Game script, too many people, too many mouths to feed in that Dallas offense. Don't know if I can trust him going forward. And finally, Kyle Pitts with a whopping 4.2 fantasy points. If Kyle Pitts could not get anything done against Alontae Taylor and the New Orleans Saints this week, it's not going to happen.
That's terrible.
Not going to happen. It is terrible. Thank you, Burns. And I was saying that sitting on my couch. I was watching and I was like, what is happening? Because Alontae Taylor is one of the lowest graded slot receiver or slot cornerbacks in the entire league. Kyle Pitts runs the majority of his snaps out of the slot. It's not good. Finally, defense, Detroit Lions, 0 points. This Detroit Lions defense has completely fallen from grace. Everybody was talking about them midway through the season as being one of the best defenses in the league. They're so good against the run. Their secondary is so good, blah, 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 blah. And they just allowed Jordan Love to have the best game of his entire career, minus Aaron Jones and any semblance of a run game. So if you've got the Lions defense, I would definitely consider streaming from here on out because I don't think that their schedule gets any easier as well. So I want to talk about the BetterCast app because we had a ton of stuff going on this weekend. If you did not join our Thanksgiving BetterCast, what are you waiting for? It was so much fun all day long. And the BetterCast app is gamifying Monday Night Football tonight on the app. You can scan that QR code, it's a free download, or go to the Apple app and Google Play stores, download it for free. Yes, completely for free. Check out Moose and Keith's game previews of the Chicago Bears at the Vikings tonight, including some of their top picks and plays. Then, after listening to them, you can compete in our free contest by answering the pregame questions, which are now live in the app. The good thing and fun thing about this app is that you can predict what will happen, you can test your knowledge, and you can win tickets for free prizes, including hoodies, signed helmets, signed jerseys, all kinds of stuff just for winning these contests. So there's no purchase necessary. It's always free to play. Not only do we have Monday night football, we've got things going on throughout the week, Thursday night football, Sunday night football. We have trivia going on recently. So make sure that you download that app, scan this QR code, and jump in all the fun with us. All of us will be in there tonight as we talk about the Bears and the Bills. So I'm going to take a quick break here, but stick around because if you're looking for some DFS plays for tonight's matchup against the Bears and Vikings, we are going to talk about that next. Don't go anywhere. The DFS heavy hitters and Monday night showdown plays are up next.
What can we expect for you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Your heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite, but that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition, and I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through. Come on! Come on! Let's go! Dig it! Yeah! Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire. Over Mark Malusis.
That was so cool. The champ is here. Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush. You were doing the Instagram live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're gonna win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose, and we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations, and no matter what, you can always hold this over Moose's head.
Yeah!
All right, guys, welcome back in. Thank you so much for being here. If you're just now joining, we just broke down the Sunday night football game, some recaps from this Sunday slate, as well as some news and injury reports. But now it's time to look to tonight's game against the Chicago Bears and Minnesota Vikings. We've got this the showdown slate over at fantasyalarm.com. If you want to look at that, make sure that you're signed up for our All Pro package. And as part of our Cyber Monday deals, we are now offering $100 off of our annual package. That adds up to $16 a month that you get for an entire year. You get not only our NFL content, you get our NBA, our MLB when our draft guide comes out, because before you know it, it's going to be baseball training camp. You also get our UFC, our NASCAR, every single sport, every single tool, all of our premium content is included in this package. And for $16 a month, you are not going to find a better deal. So make sure to scan that QR code or go to fantasyalarm.com/win. Use promo code HURRY for $100 extra off of our annual package. So the big question tonight is, can the Vikings and the Pastronaut, Joshua Dobbs, bounce back this week after their 5-game winning streak was snapped last week against Denver? So the keys to this game for the Vikings, in my opinion, are to limit the turnovers and win the turnover battle. Yes, Joshua Dobbs has been very good, but over the past couple of weeks, he has had some problems with ball security, not something that you want to see. And on the defensive side of the ball, you have to keep Justin Fields and the run game in check. The Vikings are the middle of the pack in rush yards allowed per game to the quarterback, but Justin Fields is not your normal quarterback. For the Bears, the keys are to get the run game going from the running backs. And I say running backs specifically because last week, Fields rushed for more than all 3 running backs combined, and they're going to have to be more balanced in order to get the defenses off their trail. With Donta Foreman ruled out, the bulk of this responsibility will fall on Khalil Herbert, who just got activated from IR last week. We're really going to have to see what he can do and if he can carry that full load. So let's go ahead and move on to the heavy hitters for tonight's slate. And again, make sure to go read the playbook over at fantasyalarm.com. But these are my breakdowns. Again, there aren't a lot of mid-priced options on this slate, so you're going to have to be very selective in which studs you include in your lineup. First off, we've got Justin Fields of the Chicago Bears. I know he missed some time with that thumb. His overall numbers don't look great, but in points per game, he still is the QB 10. He's got 12 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown through 7 games. And as Dan Malin points out in his playbook, the Vikings have been tough to opposing quarterbacks, but the rushing upside that Fields offers makes him an intriguing option. And we'll break that down a little later in the show. Next up, DJ Moore for the Chicago Bears. No one, and I mean no one, benefits more from Justin Fields being back in this lineup than DJ Moore. With Fields in at quarterback, Moore has a 30% target share, and it was very clear last week that he's just a better player when Fields is, not to make a pun, but on the field. He also has a good matchup against the Vikings cornerbacks, so he's somebody that you definitely want in your lineup. I actually made him my captain tonight. Spoiler alert. Next up, we've got TJ Hawkinson, tight end from the Vikings. And we'll talk more about this in a bit, but Hawkinson has just been a target monster, especially with Dobbs in at quarterback. He's seen 34 targets the past 3 games, and with his ability to bust through tackles, he could be an explosive play waiting to happen. Next up, we've got Jordan Addison, and Addison did have a down week last week. We can't gloss over that. But the matchup was also much more difficult against the Broncos and Pat Surtain than it will be against the Bears. Hawkinson has taken over as the top target earner since Dobbs came in, but that doesn't mean Addison won't have value tonight, especially against the Bears secondary. His targets have remained fairly consistent, but since Dobbs took over, he has yet to find the end zone, which is concerning for a guy who started out so hot with touchdowns. This could change this week, but it just doesn't seem like he has the same upside that he did. So if you're looking to save salary, I would look here. Moving on to some mid-tier options, we're starting with Joshua Dobbs. And this is not because of his salary. Dobbs is the third highest priced player on the slate tonight. And it's not a knock on his ability or what he's done this season. It's more of a worry about his turnovers. I think he does have some value here due to the bad Bears passing defense, but be aware that he does have some risk because of those turnovers. Next up, we've got Khalil Herbert for the Bears. Donta Foreman did not travel with the team, so that just leaves Herbert and rookie Roschon Johnson as the guys. We typically don't like pairing running backs with their quarterback, but the volume alone should make him a viable option, as the Bears tend to like to run the ball quite a bit. Next up, we've got Ty Chandler from the Vikings. And for me, it's the explosive ability that Chandler offers when he touches the ball. We saw last week where he averaged over 7 yards per carry. And I'm with Dan Malin. I'm banking on the Vikings to ride the hot hand. And for me, that is Chandler. I think he's going to have a great night tonight, and we'll get into some more of those reasons later. Greg Joseph, kicker from the Minnesota Vikings. There are so many high-priced options here that I don't feel bad starting a kicker to save some salary. He's had 8 points, 10 points, and 11 points over the last 3 weeks, so he does seem to have a safe floor. And although I typically do avoid kickers, there just aren't many value options available. And I would be willing to spend some money on putting a kicker and somebody who's going to score at least some points in my lineup. Finally, rounding this out is Cairo Santos, kicker for the Chicago Bears. And for much of the same reason I'm looking at Joseph, I'm looking at Santos, and maybe even more so. For one, he's the cheaper option, and he's had 17, 12, and even 5 points over the past 3 games. You can't really hold that 5 points against him, as that was in a Tyson Bagent at quarterback. But if the Vikings keep doing that break, don't bend style of defense to keep the Bears out of the end zone, then it is Santos time. So those are some of my favorite DFS picks for the showdown slate tonight. Coming up next, fortune does favor the bold, doesn't it? We'll be coming back with my bold predictions for Monday Night Football next. Be sure to put your questions in the chat, and we'll be right back.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coupe A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, "Hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL." And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21. I got NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there. NHL 12, I think, was the start of the new consoles for me. But the big one, the holy grail of NHL games. NHL 94 for the Sega Genesis right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game is.
Now let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta that didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
you don't even need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version.
And then you got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to be always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
Guys, welcome back in. We are getting towards the end of this show, and we do have a couple more segments to hit. First off, the Monday Night Football bold predictions. So I want to hear yours. If you have any, please throw them in the chat. I would love to hear them. But mine are starting off pretty bold. DJ Moore held scoreless. And this one, may not seem that bold as he's only scored 6 touchdowns through 11 games, but with 3 of those coming in one game. But if a Caleb Evans is out, it just makes it a little more spicy. The first time these two teams met, the Bears really couldn't get anything going, even before Justin Fields went out. And as he's the only real receiving option on this team, I think that he's going to be somewhat limited by the Minnesota defense. I think that they're going to really focus in on containing him, kind of double cover him quite a bit because let's be honest, Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney just have hands made of bricks. Second, Justin Fields scores 2 rushing touchdowns. And this one is pretty bold because as good as Fields has been on gaining yardage in the run game, he has only scored 1 rushing touchdown on the season. But with all the injuries at running back and the healthy ones being on the smaller side, we may see Fields break off a big run or two and have his best game of the season. Going back to that question earlier about you're down 11 and have Justin Fields, this is why I think that you'll be just fine. Third, Joshua Dobbs throws for 3 touchdowns. After last week, Dobbs is really going to be looking for a bounce back week. And Chicago has been stout on the ground, but they still have several weaknesses in their secondary. They've allowed the 3rd most touchdowns per game through the air, averaging 2 per game. So Dobbs should be able to exploit this matchup. Don't be surprised if he runs one in as well, because I have loved his rushing ability. And it's kind of not being talked about enough, in my opinion. Finally, I think that Ty Chandler finds the end zone for the 2nd time in 3 weeks. Yes, this is still technically Alexander Madison's backfield, but Ty Chandler has been the more explosive of the two, averaging 4.85 yards per carry on the season and 7.3 in last week's game. He also has usage in the passing game, seeing 4 targets last week. So don't be surprised if one of these touchdowns comes courtesy of Joshua Dobbs. So those are my bold predictions for Monday night. If you have any, please throw them in the chat. Would love to hear them. Also get your questions in as we're getting up against it, but you know what time it is. We have a brand new partner here at Britt's Fantasy Blitz, and you know them and you love them. It is Sleeper. So I'm sure that a lot of you already have your leagues housed on Sleeper, but there is so much more to enjoy about the app now with their new Sleeper picks. You can choose 2 or more players, multiply your entry up to 100 times, and choose from NFL, NBA, college sports, and so much more. If your fantasy season is in the toilet, there are also single week drafts that you can enter to keep your season going. Sign up today by scanning that QR code on your mobile device, or go download the Sleeper app on your mobile device and sign up using promo code VAULT3 for a 100% deposit match up to $100 for new users. Again, you have to take advantage of this offer on your mobile device so you can download the app and participate, but we've got a handy QR code on screen for you to use. So I've got my article over there at Fantasy Alarm for tonight's picks, but let's go through some of these and maybe a couple bonus picks for you. So first off, I've got Khalil Herbert going more than 10.5 receiving yards at a 1.81 times multiplier. So we mentioned it earlier with Donta Foreman out. Herbert is now the lead back. I know that the Bears don't throw a ton to the running back, but the matchup is so good tonight. Over the last 2 weeks, the Vikings have allowed 22 receptions to the running back, and with Herbert averaging over 7 yards per reception, he only needs a couple of looks to clear this mark. So I am taking more than 10.5 receiving yards for Khalil Herbert. Love it. Next up, I've got Ty Chandler going more than 32.5 rushing yards at a 1.75 times multiplier. Remember when we were talking about his explosiveness just 2 minutes ago? Yeah, I expect to see that on display tonight. The Bears have been good against the run, admittedly, but if Chandler can break off just one big run, he's close to this mark. And over the past 2 weeks, since Cam Akers injured his Achilles, Chandler has seen 15 and 10 carries. With him averaging 4.85 yards per carry on the year, he is right in line to surpass this mark. So I think it's Ty Chandler more than 32 and a half rushing yards. Next up, and Burns, I don't know if you've got this one in your repertoire, but I am going Justin Fields less than 1.5 passing touchdowns at a 1.33 times multiplier. We have already touched on it. We love Justin Fields because of his rushing ability, not necessarily his passing ability. He's only thrown for more than one touchdown twice in the 7 games that he's played this season. And the Vikings defense is pretty tough on opposing quarterbacks, ranking middle in the pack. They've allowed 1.3 passing touchdowns per game. Looking at the multiplier here, it's lower than most everything else available. And I'm taking that as a sign. He may run one in, but I don't think he gets it done through the air. Um, Next up, and this was not in the article, this is just what you get as a bonus for tuning in to Britt's Fantasy Blitz. But I'm going to take TJ Hawkinson more than 62 and a half receiving yards at 1.77 times multiplier. He's averaging 66.9 yards per game. And we already mentioned since Dobbs has come in at quarterback, he's hit this mark in 2 out of 3 games. He's averaging 9.81 yards per reception. And with the huge target share he's seeing with Dobbs under center, he should easily be able to hit this mark. Finally, to cap it off, we are going to go with DJ Moore, more than 61 and a half receiving yards at a 1.77 times multiplier. We mentioned that Vikings cornerback Caleb Evans is questionable going into tonight's matchup. And even if he plays, Moore has a great matchup against Byron Murphy Jr. On his own, Murphy has allowed 45 yards per game, ranking 84th in the league. And with Moore lining up all over the field, he will see multiple opportunities to gain yardage. He's also averaging 15.1 yards per reception this season. So with his ability to gain yards after the catch and a good cornerback matchup, he should have plenty of yardage when it's all said and done. DJ Moore, that's more. So that wraps up our sleeper picks of the day. Again, to sign up, go to fantasyalarm.com/sleeper, use the promo code VAULT3, and first-time users get a 100% deposit match up to $100, or scan that handy QR code so that it'll just bring you directly to where you want to be. It's perfect. So that about wraps up our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Check out the matchup previews on fantasyalarm.com that will be coming on Thursday, the waiver wire article coming out tomorrow, as well as our other sleeper picks coming out every day. And stay tuned for more information about those sleeper drafts later on in the season. Again, if you haven't joined or downloaded the BetterCast app, make sure to sign up for that. Play our games, interact with the community, answer our questions, and win tickets for prizes. And finally, make sure that you take advantage of that sale, that amazing sale that we have going on for the Fantasy Alarm All Pro subscription. There's $100 off the annual subscription. Use promo code HURRY for $100 off the first monthly payment. Coming up next from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, the Better Sports Betting Show with Dan Servadidio and John Impemba. From 5 to 6, the NBA DFS Live Show with John Impemba and James Grande. We will be back here on Friday, same place, same time. And as always, have a great week, and thanks for getting blitzed.